Solid century. On September 15th, 2025, I woke up a bit later than usual. I hadn't yet stirred from my bed when the thought that popped into my head was how my 1920 born parents navigated the social changes that they saw over their 80 plus years. Mom lived from 1920 until 2008, while Dad was 29 through 2014, a near century that saw overwhelming fundamental change in the USA as well as Western society in general. I briefly thought about trying to enumerate some of the incredible societal shifts Mom and Dad lived through and how they presented their views and words and deeds to me over the 6 decades we shared together, but rejected the essay due to other ongoing projects upon which I should be focusing. I rejected the writing project until I logged into my computer and did a quick check on Facebook. The first post I saw was from my friend A.H., who wrote, "I'm still gay. I see the posts, not necessarily from my friends or family, but sometimes that too. Gone is my gay pride. Hopefully, alive is still your love for me. But I'm still gay. It's not a choice. I have to reroute my way through life I once felt comfortable because what wasn't a choice remains. I'm still gay. Do you still love me? Can we go back to uplifting every form of life? People go to the zoo and spend money to see forms of life that they haven't seen before. Many of the lives they're viewing cannot communicate. Sometimes they even throw shit. Can't we see the lives we see every day for free? Conscious beings that don't normally throw shit and just be okay? That's what I think. Human lives are precious, and we need to protect each other before the robots take over." AH's post convinced me that my other writing can wait a day or two, that far more urgent was that I address his Facebook post. So after commenting, "Absolutely yes, I still love you," I woke up this morning thinking about how my 1920s born parents navigated change in their 80 plus years on Earth, and your post has persuaded me to explore that idea as a blog post. Keep the faith. You are loved. You are worthy. XXOO. Which brings me to my essay, Solid Century. We're all a mess, every one of us, but our messes are not created equally. The life experiences of our caregivers greatly influence succeeding generations. Did our parents or other caregivers emphasize obedience as a primary duty of their children in their care, or did they foster questioning? Were we taught to answer yes, sir, and no, ma'am, when we were told to do something or ask a question? Or was it acceptable to ask why something is as it is portrayed to be? Were the literal facts of life presented from a fundamentalist, literal biblical perspective that insisted that the Bible or other religious texts are the way, the truth, and the light, and as such must not be questioned? Or were they presented from a natural science perspective where the emphasis is on continued learning through revising theory based upon further, more accurate observation? Were we reared in a home where it is understood that all knowledge is an approximation of truth, reality, and that we must be willing to change our beliefs in what has been and what should be based upon advances in knowledge that allow us to creep closer to an understanding of what is truth, what is fantasy, and what lies between or in a "it's in the book" household? It has been less than 6,000 years since humans created writing, and while literacy is not a prerequisite to learning, it is essential to the speedy advance of discovery and the sharing of knowledge. Another essential tool in the search for greater understanding is having the ability to admit that our initial thoughts concerning what we observe were either good first approximations upon which we can grow towards even greater understanding of what is, or whether our early ideas were wishful thinking that has little, if anything, to do with truth. Some seemingly obvious truths ain't. Truths, that is. As a young child, I was taught that matter comes in 3 forms, solid, liquid, or gas. But we all know that solid ain't. I was still a child when I was introduced to superhot plasma as a 4th state of matter, but it's the massive amount of space within the atoms of solid objects that is counterintuitive. Many faith-based folks believe that the universe was created in 6 days and that humans were created by an omnipotent, omnipresent spirit who created the universe, galaxy, solar system, and Earth. They know that a God literally created and shaped the universe and then handed it to humans, and that this knowledge is, well, gospel. To some, a creationist model is truth that must not be questioned. For fundamentalists, being presented with indisputable evidence that the genesis of the universe ain't as it's described in Genesis is an incredibly difficult pill to swallow. If the model for our physical world contradicts religious beliefs and our social contract, our mores, if you will, presents an even greater difficulty because how we treat one another is man-made, arbitrary, and has changed and evolved over a far longer time than our 6,000 years of being literate. Despite the overwhelming physical data that disproves a wham, bam, thank you, ham, biblical belief concerning how the universe came to be that challenges the validity of Genesis, fundamentalists insist that evidence concerning the age of the universe and or evolution is a manifestation of a demonic being. The goal of said demon, devil, Beelzebub, is to deceive, and having our beliefs and how we should treat others can be even more difficult for the full spectrum of folks, from absolute believers in a God to full-on atheists. Atheists who know that gods are, to twist the Bible, created in man's own image, who are equally certain of how we should treat our fellow human beings and the world at large. Challenging dogma, mores, or social contracts is fraught with dangers. Wars have been and are being fought over challenges to hierarchy, belief system, what is and what is not socially acceptable behavior. Challenges that are older than history and likewise filled with suffering. So how did my 1920s parents cope? I don't know, but I can share some of their high points as well as some of their blind spots. Mom was born in Saginaw, Michigan, while Dad was born in a nearby sleepy rural town named Reese. Saginaw was urban and racially segregated. Reese was farmland and likewise segregated. They moved from working class to middle class the way a lot of folks did that were born in the 1920s did. They did it through warfare. Dad volunteered for the Navy, and after his time in service used a GI Bill to get his bachelor's degree. He went on to get a master's in EDD, all of which equaled greater opportunity for upward mobility. Dad shared with me and my 4 siblings a story from when he enlisted, a story of blatant discrimination. He and a black man arrived at the recruiting station and were given the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, or ASVAB. They both scored well, and Dad went on to advanced electronics training while his test equal was assigned to kitchen duty, an incident that opened Dad's eyes to the obscene and absurd inequality with which African Americans were treated. Dad was a college professor at Illinois State University during the Vietnam War upheaval, and he saw more of the same type of discrimination. Was Dad prejudiced? Of course he was, but he knew that fighting his early indoctrination was necessary, and he did. Dad came from a large Catholic family. He attended Catholic high school, and as a young man, he considered becoming a priest. While his faith was extremely important to him and guided him in many ways, he was never a fundamentalist, never a believer that God wrote the Bible and that every word is gospel. His times and his faith shaped him, and he believed that sex outside of marriage was immoral and that marriage is a sacred union between one man and one woman. He shared his generation's homophobia, the belief that sexual relations between two people of the same sex is wrong, but he was not ugly about it. Dad believed that sins come in venial, or lesser sins, and mortal, or terrible ones. He believed that homosexual acts are sinful, but he also believed in hate the sin, love the sinner, and that there are far worse sins that people commit than 2 men or 2 women engaging in carnal acts with one another. Hey, we're all products of our time. Meanwhile, Mom, who was born the same year that the 19th Amendment that gave women the right to vote became law, was making her way in the world without leaning on a man when the two of them met. She finished high school, something only half of her age and gender mates accomplished. Not being a bra-burning vocal advocate of radical change, Mom didn't see herself as a feminist, but she was one nonetheless. Equal pay, equal opportunity, the ability to open her own checking account, to get a credit card in her name. Mom never thought of herself as a feminist, but she believed that regardless of race or sex, people should work hard, be rewarded for their work, and encourage others to do as well. And prior to becoming a mother, her career path was an example of this belief. I describe myself as a lower A atheist, someone who with no belief in atheism, who does not believe that any of the religions or sacred texts are indicative of whatever higher power may or may not exist. But I'm awfully fond of the second of 2 commandments attributed to Jesus via Mark 12:30-31, which states, love your neighbor as yourself. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. My parents reared me to think, to love, and to assist others. And while I wasn't a particularly wild child, I certainly caused my parents heartache. I drank some as a youth, but not a great amount. I've never indulged in illegal drugs, and the number of women with whom I've had any degree of carnal knowledge can be counted on one hand. I'm an SWM, born in the second half of the 20th century, who understands how my life has been aided because of those three little letters. Letters that make me no better than anyone else, just more fortunate, because while being a straight white male is not virtuous, it has garnered me many unearned privileges that are denied to folks who are not SWM. Privileges such as not being arrested for sitting at a Woolworths counter because I'm black, not being castigated, arrested, and lynched for being black, for being gay, for being non-Christian. In a world of absurd societal bigotry, I lucked out in the dice throw of genetic time and spatial creation. But that doesn't make me better than others, and anyone who proclaims to follow that Mark 31b, love thy neighbor as yourself bit, then castigates, discriminates, lynches, and denies others the love and respect all should receive because they're not SWM, or at least SWF, is about as anti-Christ-like as a human being can be. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad. Thanks for both telling me and showing me that everyone deserves a good chance on this earth, that our way, truth, and light isn't everyone.